When Luke and Nora looked over at the giant snake in their backyard, they were so afraid they couldn't even scream. And of course, David the gnome and Chippy, who had just been transformed into a horse-sized chipmunk, were terrified too. This snake was big enough to eat all of them if he wanted to. Luke, Nora, and David all jumped on Chippy's back and screamed at the same time, "Chippy, run!" And so Chippy took off running as fast as he could, and of course, the snake slithered right after him. But this time, the snake was so big, it was knocking trees over everywhere it went. And just then, Luke and Nora saw their dad open the back door because he was about to come out and call them in for dinner. And he didn't even know what to think when he saw who was in his backyard and what was going on. Luke and Nora shouted, "Dad, this giant snake is trying to eat us! Help!" Dad saw the huge, hideous monster of a snake chasing his kids, and he yelled, "Hang on, kids!" And he picked up his phone and called the police. And when Dad put down the phone, he started running to the door to go back outside. But on the way, he looked down at the table and saw a drawing that Luke had made just a few days before. It was a drawing of a stick man and a dinosaur, and it was drawn in an unusual color that he had never seen before. And he couldn't find the marker anywhere, but he did notice something laying on top of the page that kind of looked like a magic wand or something. That's a really good drawing of a dinosaur, Dad thought. I didn't realize Luke was so good at drawing pictures. It almost looks like this thing is real. And then Dad picked up the wand, not realizing it was actually a real magic wand. And he thought, I wonder where the kids got this thing. It kind of looks like one of those wands from that Harry Potter movie. And he looked back at the picture of the dinosaur and thought, now that is exactly what we need right now. A great big dinosaur strong enough to chase that huge snake away. I don't know how else we're going to get rid of that thing. Man, if only this dinosaur on this page was as real as it looked. And then Dad chuckled to himself and thought, that could only happen if I had a real magic wand. And then he set what he thought was just a toy wand back down on the paper. And that was when it all started to happen. As Dad started walking away, he could hear what sounded like a magical spell floating around over the paper. And when he looked back down, he couldn't believe his eyes. Luke's dinosaur drawing popped right off the paper, and then he grew into a full-size, real-life dinosaur. And it was even wearing a collar with a name tag that said, T-Bone. Dad didn't realize this wasn't any ordinary drawing. It had been drawn with Luke's magic marker, and anything drawn with that marker could come to life. And then the dinosaur started walking around the house, and he looked outside and saw that giant snake that was still chasing Luke and Nora around on their chipmunk. T-Bone was not happy about this. He let out a loud roar, and then he barged through the back door and ran right after that snake. It only took him 5 seconds to catch up to that snake, and then he picked up that snake with his huge jaws, and he spun it around and around, and then he threw that snake as high and as far as he could, and the snake squirmed wildly as it flew in the air off into the distance, and it went so far away, they never even saw where it landed. Chippy finally stopped running, and the two kids and David the gnome all rolled off of Chippy's back and onto the ground and let out a big sigh of relief. They were finally safe. And after they finally calmed down, they realized they still had to figure out what to do with David and Chippy. They needed to get them back to their normal size again. So David said, Chippy, come with me, please. He hopped on Chippy's back, and they walked over to where the golden shrinking tree was standing. You know, the first tree that shrunk Luke and Nora in the first place. And David and Chippy both climbed up into the tree, and since the two of them were so big, the tree was bending and leaning over. But sure enough, Once they got to the top, they slowly shrunk back down to their normal size again. And then Nora walked up to the tree and put her hand out, and Chippy and David jumped into her hand, and she lowered them down to the ground, and they jumped off of her hand onto the grass. And Chippy squeaked something back at Nora that sounded like a goodbye, and then he scampered off into the woods. And then Luke picked up David the gnome and brought him back to his garden house in the front yard, and it seemed like everything was back to normal again. But there was just one loose end. Even though T-Bone had thrown that snake out of their neighborhood, nobody actually saw where he had landed. And one thing they knew for sure about that snake was that it had never climbed back up into the shrinking tree to get back to his normal size. That's right. There was a giant, angry, and very hungry snake still slithering around somewhere out there. And it was only a matter of time until that snake found his way back home, which just happened to be in Luke and Nora's backyard. But that's a story for another day.